guys, Janet on occasion, and today we're playing the campaign lore play. So, as you can see, still in Middenheim, still doing that. We are starting to fight Nordland somewhat, so we will be talking about them probably in the next episode. So I'm going to try and finish up talking about Middenheim in this one. So hopefully I manage to do that. So I'm going to talk mainly just the different... I'm going to try and keep it vaguer than the previous one. The previous one got a little bit heavy on just talking about the random little places and things. So I'll talk about the districts and some other stuff, I think. So next up is the Freiburg. So situated between the Königsgarten and the Great Park, the district known as the Freiburg is one of broad, leafy avenues and well-appointed houses. While not as grand as the Grafsmund, with its huge mansions of nobility, the Freiburg is nonetheless a pleasant and prosperous neighbourhood. Its main distinction is that it is home to many of the city's scholars, wizards and priests. The city's famed Collegium Theologica is found here, as is the Temple of Sigmar and the headquarters of the Guild of Wizards and Alchemists. There are numerous small streets crammed with small bookshops, dealing in magical ingredients, antique sellers and similar businesses. Small cafes may be found alongside them, but most cater only for the breakfast and lunch trade, closing before dinner. The taverns as popular places for students and intellectuals to meet and discuss magic, history, art, politics, and anything else, and there are even one or two small art galleries tucked away down side streets. The whole district is has a somewhat bohemian air. So obviously we can't talk about this district without talking about the Temple of Sigmar, being our patron deity in the Empire. So while the bulk of Middenheimers are devoted followers of Ulrich, the patron deity of the Empire also has a strong following in the city, especially, cynics assert, among those who desire the Emperor's favour. The second largest Temple of Sigmar in the world, after the one in Altdorf, the Empire's capital, is impressively constructed to ensure that, even in the heart of Ulrican territory, Sigmar is not neglected. The chief priest here, Werner Stolz, goes by the resounding title of High Capitular of Nordland, a post he has held for many years. As one of the highest-ranking priests in the cult of Sigmar, he is well regarded by the Grand Theogonist in Altdorf, and there are whispers that he may one day aspire to that exalted post himself. So, wizards, guys, wizards. We've got to talk about wizards. So, the Guild of Wizards and Alchemists. This three-storey building is built in a somewhat eccentric style, with spires and turrets jutting out at odd angles. The Guild of Wizards and Alchemists is responsible for overseeing all magical operations in the city. And issues licenses to practice magic. It also acts as a professional body representing the city's wizards and alchemists, as it did some years ago when it bitterly opposed the introduction of a proposed tax on magical ingredients. Kind of like a VAT there. The guild began as an informal social club for wizards, founded by men and women trained at the then new Colleges of Magic in Altdorf, but based north of the imperial capital. When Graf Berthold asked the wizards if they'd help defend the city in a time of need, the club members decided to formalise the arrangement by founding a guild. They successfully petitioned the Colleges of Magic for a charter, for which they had to agree to welcome wizards of all 8 orders. Since that time, the Guild of Wizards and Alchemists has become a pillar of Middenheim, providing protection to the city and regulating magical activity in its environs. High Wizard Albrecht Helschner heads the guild. Helschner, a wizard lord, which is basically the second to highest ranking, I believe. That's Archwizard. Okay, so it's not even stupidly high, but still pretty high. I think the Archwizard is actually the head of the order, and it's only the the Grand Patriarch that's the Supreme Patriarch that's above that. But anyway, it is currently away with the Graf and R. Ulrich, commanding the wizards who accompany Middenheim's army. In his absence, Deputy High Wizard Janet Eberhauer runs the guild. In normal circumstances, it is possible for guild members to receive training in every school of magic except demonology and necromancy, both of which are illegal throughout the Empire. However, many of the city's most powerful wizards are currently away with the army, leaving fewer instructors available. There is a base 50% chance of finding any specific magical institution at the guild under present circumstances. That's more of a role-playing thing, but, a license to practice magic within the walls costs a standard 1 gold coin and is valid for 1 year. So that's a ninth of some of the meals we mentioned in the last episode, and it's valid for a year. So it's not too bad. Guild membership costs 12 gold coins per year, and includes access to the guild's well-stocked magical library and tuition facilities. So that's kind of novel. So just to practice magic within the city, there's a fee, which is you know, pretty bizarre. But, you know, I guess it does keep them stocked up in, you know, magical items and books and all the rest of it. You know, running costs, I suppose. So, you know, not a bad idea. And I guess it stops, you know, a load of sort of heretical wizards running around. You can ask if they got a license, and if they don't, then that's immediately suspicious. So, so that's kind of cool that, you know, something so powerful is regulated like that. So yeah, I find that quite interesting. We did also mention the Collegium Theologica, rivaling the library we mentioned in the last episode. The Collegium was founded in 1762 to train students for the priesthood of Ulrich and to promote the study of and dissemination of the cult's religious writings. Since then, its scope has broadened into just about every field of study, and it ranks among the foremost centres of learning in the Old World. However, it lacks an imperial charter, granting it the official status of a university. And this fact rankles with Middenheimers. A diplomatic and political campaign has long been underway to gain the charter for the Collegium, but some attribute its lack of success to religious prejudice, pointing out that the universities of Altdorf and Nuln are sponsored by the imperial family and the priesthood of Sigmar. Nonetheless, the Collegium Theologica, simply known as the College, as if there were only one in the world, is proud of its independence, and its library is one of the finest in the Old World. Most students enroll in a 3-year residential course of study, which costs 50 gold coins per year. This is just for tuition, though, and once the cost of books, equipment, materials, and even modest living expenses are added, the total can easily reach 200 gold coins per year. So that's crazy money. That is crazy, crazy money. So, yeah, to be a student in this place, you're going to need to be a nobleman, really. So many students live far beyond their means, especially when food and drink are concerned. So, yeah, novel. So the next place is the Wind, or the Wind. It's the next district. So situated in the southeast corner of the city, between the Old Market and the Southgate districts, the Wind consists mostly of artisans' workshops and merchants' houses. So on merchants' warehouses, the artisans usually live over or adjacent to their workshops, but there are a few residences with no workshops attached. The Wind is a business-like area, built to be functional rather than decorative. The city wall between the south and east gates saw some of the heaviest fighting during the siege, and the streets of the Wind that lie closer to the walls bore their share of damage. As the home neighbourhood of most of the city's builders and stonemasons, however, this damage is being repaired more quickly than in other districts. Now, this is a novel one, because in the Wind there's a chapel of Grungni. You might not know who Grungni is, actually, but anyway, dwarfs have a part of Middenheim since the earliest days, when dwarfen allies tunnelled up through the rock so that Artor of the Teutogens could lead his people to found their city there. The Wind is home to the majority of the city's dwarfen population, and it is here that the chapel of Grungni provides for their spiritual needs. To a non-dwarf, the entrance to the chapel is not easy to find. It consists of a plain stone doorway set between two workshops. Beyond the door, a covered alley slopes down steeply, before taking a sharp turn beneath one of the buildings. About 40 feet below ground, the tunnel opens out into a cavern, which forms the outer part of the chapel. Here stands a masterfully worked stone statue of Grungni, leaning on his pick after opening the way to the underground world for the dwarfen race. This is as far as any non-dwarf has ever been into the shrine. Only trusted friends are brought even this far, and no elf has ever set foot here. An inner chamber holds the main chapel, where only dwarfs may set foot. Another statue of Grungni stands here, this one forged of brass, and set with gems around its belt, and on its ornate crown. It is widely rumoured in the city's underworld that this statue is actually of solid gold, but this is not true. Another rumour claims that the Chapel of Grungni contains a hidden entrance to the Undercity, but the chapel authorities have declined to confirm or deny this. So, can't wait to talk about the Undercity. That's going to be an interesting one. So, just a bit of an update on how the campaign is going here. So, obviously, I'm moving into Nordland, and here I'm trying to constantly get Ostland to confederate with me, because I really don't want to go to war with Ostland, because it's basically 3 provinces that they hold now. So, I just kind of want them to hand over all their land. But anyway, you can see I went on a recruiting drive. I've got a load of new agents, and at some point I will be renaming them all to more suitable things. So the warrior priests I'm going to call Volton and Luther Huss and stuff like that. I haven't done it yet as of this point. I'm still deciding where the agent should be going and things. So I will be getting to that later on. I don't know if it's in this video or if it's in the next bit of footage that I did. But anyway, so that's happening. So that's fun. So a bit more sort of roleplay stuff in there. More characters, basically. More actual Warhammer characters. So yeah, I always like that. So anyway, moving on. Next, let's talk about the Dwarfen Engineers Guild, because you know, they're going to be important in you know, rebuilding a city. And at this point in my campaign, I did just besiege it, so the dwarves would play a big part in fixing it up. So the Dwarfen Engineers Guild. This small, unobtrusive building stands not far from the entrance to the Chapel of Grungni. A secret tunnel connects the two, but only the most senior priests and guild officials know this. Unlike the guild house of the stonemasons and architects, the Middenheim quarters of the Engineers Guild does not act as a showcase for the workmanship of its members. In fact, it was built to be purely practical. The Engineers Guild has no need to advertise. Most, if not all, dwarves plying trade in building or engineering in Middenheim are members of the Engineers Guild, and so are many who are engaged in other professions. The guild also acts as a social club and political group for the city's dwarfen population, duplicating some of the functions of the Commission for Elves, Dwarfen and Halfling interests. However, many dwarves prefer to go through the guild rather than the Commission, since it is entirely dwarf-run and not connected with the city government. For both these reasons, they maintain it is more suitable to be trusted with the business and interests of Middenheim's dwarfs. Membership in the guild is only open to dwarfs, and prospective members must pass stringent tests of craftsmanship before they are admitted and licensed to work in the city. Some years ago, the Guild of Stonemasons and Architects tried to attract to its own ranks some of the dwarfs who were rejected by the Engineers Guild. However, they all preferred to sharpen their skills and reapply to the Engineers Guild, rather than join a body that had lower standards, and even admitted elves. So again, more dwarf and elven racism there. It's very rude, isn't it? So next up, we have the Südgarten district and the Westgate. So this area extends along either side of the roads that leads into the city from the Westgate. It is a neighbourhood of middle-class homes, shops and warehouses. The Südgarten, South Garden, district takes its name from the Green Park, which occupies its southern end. Streets here are wider than in the Westgate district, and buildings are generally more opulent. Westgate is really two districts, north and south of the Westgate Road. To the north is the leafy and spacious, much like the Südgarten, home to several of Middenheim's lesser temples. While south of the road, it is a more crowded area, which is humming with trade before the siege. Sorry, which was humming with trade. Yes, sieges tend to ruin things like that. So anyway, the Westgate and the Western Causeway saw their share of fighting, weathering repeated attacks by the demonic forces of Belakor, the Dark Master. However, they are less heavily damaged than their eastern counterparts. They were bombarded from the air by flights of harpies dropping rocks, and from the ground by Belakor's demonic horde, and by the terrible Shadow Stalker, a powerful demonic entity he summoned to serve him. While the stones of the walls and gate are blackened, pitted and cracked, and a few buildings have roofs damaged by stray rocks, the damage is not as extensive as the eastern side of the city. So there's also a few temples and things we need to mention here, because no empire town is really complete without, you know, a smattering of all the different religions, all the different gods. I suppose they're all kind of similar religions, aren't they? Just sort of the empire's gods. You know, they have a lot of them. Most believe in all of them. Well, they all believe in all of them, but most of them worship all of them. So anyway, so there's Moorspark, which is a cemetery. At the eastern end of Northwest Gate, lies the crowded cemetery known as Moorspark. It is not far from the Physicians Guild, and cynics have asserted that it is not entirely coincidental. As the name suggests, Moorspark is a public open space as well as a cemetery. It's more Moors Park rather than Moorspark. But anyway, Moors Park. It is less frequented. It is one of the city's few public spaces without at least some refugees crowded into makeshift shelters. The northern and eastern sides of the park are lined with grand mausoleums and family vaults belonging to the city's rich and powerful. Because of the limited space on top of the Faulschlag Rock, you know, the big mountain that Middenheim is sat on top of, the burial ground has no space for expansion, and so even a grave in the more crowded south and west of the cemetery is beyond the means of most Middenheimers. The less well-off are cremated, or buried at the foot of the rock outside the city walls. However, as members of the upper classes have been fond of pointing out, one result of this is those who can afford to be buried here usually have the means to provide themselves with pleasing and well-crafted monuments. As a result, the park is crammed with statues, obelisks, stone urns on plinths, and other fine examples of the monumental mason's art. Close to the northern entrance of the park stands a small shrine to Mor, In keeping with tradition, it is plainly built of black stone and lacks any form of ornamentation. Its doorway has never held any doors, symbolic of the teaching that Mor's realm is always open. It is here that funeral services are conducted for those who can afford burial within the park. The death toll of the siege has weighed heavily on the cult of Mor in Middenheim. So Mor is the god of death, in case that wasn't obvious. Whose priests and officials suddenly found themselves called upon to deal with hundreds, even thousands of dead in a single day. Behind the chapel, an area of the burial ground once reserved for priests was levelled, and a great funeral pyre was set up to receive the dead. An abbreviated funeral service was read over each new batch of corpses as they arrived, and then they were burned so that the souls could fly quickly to Mor's realm, and their bodies be saved from unholy use by necromancers and other minions of chaos, and to stop them from breeding disease to threaten their living neighbours. The pyre is nothing more now than a large pile of ash, with the occasional calcified bone fragment showing bright white on the surface. A thick, oily soot clings to all the surrounding buildings and monuments, filling the air with the smell of burnt flesh. The sextons who attend the graveyard are digging the ashes into the ground, one barrowful at a time, and keeping the remainder of the pile wetted down so that the wind will not scatter the ashes across the nearby streets and houses. There is talk of building a monument on this spot to all those killed in the defence of the city, with inscriptions in Eltharin and Kazalid, as well as Reichspiel. So that's the elf, dwarf, and human languages. Well, Empire languages. Bretonians don't speak. They speak Bretonii, not Reichspiel. But anyway. Like many graveyards throughout the Old World, Mor's Park is home to a large flock of ravens, Mor's sacred bird. At night they roost in the streets surrounding the park, and during the day they soar outside the city walls, feeding on the rotting corpses of hook-handed flayerkin that still hang from the masonry in the rock below. This is generally regarded as a good omen. The devout see it as a sign of Mor's triumph over all life, which includes chaos. The more practical comment that it is good to see Mor's ravens helping clean up the city, just like their two-legged neighbours. So now we've got Mor out of the way, let's move on to Shalyah. So there's also a temple of Shalyah, which is sort of god of healing and things. Hates Nurgle, disease, not good. Anyway, although smaller than the temples of Ulrich and Sigmar, this is a stunning piece of architecture, with gorgeous carved marble facings and frescoes inside the great by the great Tilean master Angelo de Rimas. Attached to the temple building is a small infirmary, surrounded by a garden of medicinal herbs. The Temple of Shalyah was stretched to the limit during the siege. As well as coping with a never-ending stream of wounded from the fighting, the priestesses of Shalyah had to be vigilant against disease. Phaetor the Tainted, a champion of Nurgle, attacked the west gate along with Be'lakor's demonic horde and the beastmen of Khazrak One-Eye. But thanks in large part to the priestesses of Shalyah, the plagues that Phaetor sought to unleash upon the city were contained. The strain on the Temple of Shalyah scarcely lessened with the lifting of the siege. The priestesses, assisted by devout followers and volunteers from all over the city, have turned their attention from treating the wounded to bringing relief to the thousands of refugees who crowd the city, as well as those Middenheimers who lost their homes in the attack. The infirmary is still packed to overflowing, and every available space has been turned over to treating the sick or housing the homeless. They're pretty grim, isn't it? But, nice bunch. Nice bunch. So, the Temple of Myrmidia next. So, Myrmidia is what's the word? Sort of an imported religion from sort of the Southlands, the little border princes, etc. Sorry, not the Southlands in, the Southlands. No. Anyway, from further south, border princes and stuff like that. So, Temple of Myrmidia. Visitors are often surprised to find a Temple of Myrmidia in the city of the White Wolf, since she and Ulrich are long-standing rivals in myth and story. This small temple was founded several centuries ago by a unit of Tilean mercenaries who were serving in Middenheim during the Age of the Three Emperors. It is a modest structure, but its 3 resident priests keep it going with offerings from visitors and donations from a few high-ranking members of the city's military command. So the thing with Myrmidia is, she's sort of a military god, right? So, like Ulrich and Sigmar are both warrior gods. She's more of a strategy god. So slightly different in that respect. So yeah, kind of novel. Okay, so next district. So we're talking about the Merchant District now. So this district consists of the 3 adjacent neighbourhoods of Geldmund, Korfzeit and Brotkopf. While merchants, workshops and warehouses can be found in many parts of Middenheim, the merchant district is the commercial hub of the city. And, oh, now I'm attacking Nordland, aren't I? Well, Norden. I'll talk about that later. So anyway, Rocktofts and Corsite are almost exclusively commercial neighbourhoods, packed with warehouses and mercantile offices, with the occasional tavern of reasonable quality. Geldmund is where the bulk of the local merchants keep their homes, although it is not as grand as Grafsmund, and the city's upper crust look down on its residents as nouveau riche, lacking in breeding. Very, very pompous, some of these people. Being some distance away from the city walls, the merchant district survived the siege with minimal damage. On a couple of occasions, mobs of refugees attacked a few warehouses in search of food, but the city watch quickly contained them. Today, the warehouses are almost empty, as trade with the outside world is still in the process of being re-established. The merchants of Geldmund are keeping up appearances and living on their savings, but many are secretly worried that the hard times are not over yet. Also, trying to keep up the semblance of normality are the merchant district's various clubs and taverns. The three best known, the Heaven's Lament, the Templar's Arms, and the Mano War, are kept in business largely by the determination of their regular patrons to spend as freely as they did before the siege. To be, or to appear to be, in financial straits is a grave admission of weakness in mercantile circles. And although the city's merchants lost much as anyone in recent months, they would sooner die than admit it. So obviously we've got to talk about the Merchants Guild, right? You know, this is a city of guilds. So the Merchants Guild, strategically placed where the roads from the west, south and east gates meet, the Merchants Guild is an impressive 3-storey building, decorated with elaborate stucco work in the Chilean style. Always a hub of activity, it is now one of the busiest spots in the entire city. Although there is little actual trading done owing to the recent disruption, and everyone is running low on both stock and cash, the guild members spend their time trying to look busy and prosperous, while watching each other for signs of financial weakness. They circle each other like wounded sharks, waiting for some sign to decide who will be torn apart first. That's a bit grim. But I find it novel. It's, you know, sort of Chilean design, because, you know, Chile is it's a land of trade. So I find that really, really rather special. That, you know, that does sort of carry over, you know, into the Empire. You know, where there are merchants, there are always Chileans, and there's always going to be Chilean influence. So, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool indeed. So, another one though, there's also the Trade Commission. So, formerly known as the Commission for Commerce, Trade and Taxation. The reason I said commission like that is because it's spelled with a K in here. You know, formally, anyway. This government office was originally set up to oversee the city's mercantile community. The appointed bureaucrats proved no match for the cunning and subtlety of the merchants, and now nearly every seat on the Commission's governing council is occupied by a senior member of the Merchants Guild. Some senior guild members have been known, in unguarded moments, to refer to the Commission as the Annex, and the city's merchants are effectively in charge of policing themselves. The Commission also has contacts with the city's various trade and craft guilds, and many lucrative deals have been made behind its doors. Today, it is largely engaged in searching old laws for precedents that would allow tax revenue to be remitted back to the merchants to rebuild Middenheim's economy. So I do find that very amusing. You can't really control merchants in Warhammer. There's not a lot of regulation, and when you do try, you just end up with, you know, merchants spending a lot of money in order to campaign and get elected into those seats. Because, you know, you got to spend money to make money sometimes. But I find that very amusing. They're now in charge of regulating themselves, which is just classic sort of, you know, medieval stuff going wrong. I'm sure it was established for a good reason, but yeah, not really behaving the way it should anymore, is it? So anyway, so I mentioned that coach company in last episode. There's also a second coach company called the Wolf Runner Coaches. So, in theory, Wolf Runner coaches compete with Castle Rock coaches, who we mentioned last episode, on the route serving Middenheim. But although a great rivalry exists between the two companies, they have effectively shared the city's business between them. While Castle Rock coaches serve Altdorf and the southern routes, Wolf Runner coaches control the lucrative Marienburg run and the routes in the northern part of the Empire. The Wolf Runner coach yards are very quiet at the moment. All their horses were commandeered for the army, along with most of the coachmen in their employ. The coaches stand idle in their sheds, with only a couple of caretakers left behind to look after business. The lands in the north of the city were the worst affected by the forces of chaos, and although the occasional heavily guarded caravan arrives from Marienburg, the road is far from safe. It is not clear when regular service will be restored. So okay guys, that's all the districts. We've finally done it. It's taken almost an hour, but yeah, we've talked about most of what's in Middenheim. I did actually miss out quite a lot in order to try and get through it. But still, that's good going. Well done us. Me for reading it all and you for bothering to stick around. So thanks guys. So next though, we've done the city, but we haven't done the Undercity. That's right. There's a lot going on underneath the city, and I'm actually going to leave that for now. I'm going to leave that as a teaser for the next episode, I reckon. Yeah. First, I'm going to talk more about the Drakwald. That's right, because there's something about the Drakwald I didn't mention when we're talking about the Beastmen there, and I think it's definitely worth mentioning. Within the Empire, the largest and most powerful human nation, lie many secluded greenskin lairs from which are launched innumerable raids. Along with scattered orc tribes, the deep woods are home to the forest goblins. It was in these arboreal depths that goblins first encountered the enormous spiders that hunt those treacherous regions. Over the ages, the forest goblins have developed a close and disturbing relationship with these eight-legged denizens, even coming to worship them. The Black Pit, also called the Valley of Many Eyes, is the breeding grounds for the largest of spiders, and a sacred site for those that worship the spider god. It can be found in the depths of the Drakwald, and it is a death sentence to pass the web-covered spider totems that mark its boundaries. Beyond the forests, even the vast riverways of the Empire offer no respite from Greenskins. Periodically, a war boss will turn into a pirate captain, that's spelled K-A-P-T-I-N, by the way, plying the miles-wide waters of the head of a ramshackle flotilla of ships. The Imperial Navy ruthlessly destroys such greenskin armadas, but more always arise. So yeah, there's also greenskins in the Drakwald. That's where a lot of the forest goblins live, and it's a real hub for spider worship. So as well as beastmen running around in the Drakwald, there's also a load of goblin spider riders and Arachnarok spiders and crazy stuff like that. So I actually want to talk about them a little bit because I rarely get a chance to talk about greenskins, but talk about the Drakwald, it just makes sense to. So that's what I'm going to do. And so obviously I can't talk about the forest goblins without talking about the forest goblin spider riders. So the dark forests of the old world are home to many dangerous creatures, including beastmen, jabberslythes, and countless other evil-minded things. In these gloomy arboreal regions also dwell the forest goblins. These distinctive goblin tribes decorate themselves with bright feathers. The quills often stuck directly into their skin. Different tribes use various coloured feather combinations and bear tribal glyphs on their shield and skin. What is most unusual about forest goblins is how they are so intertwined with the spiders that live deep within the woods. They are eaten as food, milked for poisons, kept as pets, and even worshipped as gods. The giant spider breed grows large enough to serve as mounts for forest goblins, who capture and hand-rear these scuttling nightmares. There are many subtypes of giant spider, such as Talayan greybacks, Drakwald man-catchers, and the scarlet deathheads of the Great Forest, to name just a few. All are poisonous and have steely pincer-like mandibles that can punch through plate mail to deliver a toxic bite. While not as fast as wolves or horses, these spiders can move at speed through the most dense patches of woods. Forest goblin spider riders have become masters at stalking their prey, nimbly guiding their multi-legged beasts to scuttle across the treetop canopy in order to get into ideal position before pouncing. Spider rider mobs are known to ambush Empire patrols, eradicate beastmen herds, or even attack large monsters that encroach into their territory. In battle, spider riders act as light cavalry, although the shrewd gobbos always look to maneuver into dense terrain. They know that once ensconced by in a copse of trees, these spider riders will have cover from an enemy's attack while being able to quickly launch their own deadly strikes. Some regiments typically slink over obstacles or around enemies' flanks, seeking to pick off vulnerable targets. The most aggressive spider riders scurry straight at a foe, relying on their spears and the venomous bites of their mounts. When they charge, the forest goblins are well known for screaming out their horrible, high-pitched and undulating battle cries. Cunning raiders, spider riders have learned to creep soundlessly from beneath the eaves to launch ambushes or to make surprise attacks. The climbing ability of their mounts allows spider riders to effortlessly clamber up and over wooden palisades or even high stone walls to reach the more vulnerable villages beyond. Spider riders have become adept at attacking defended buildings, plucking defenders from the ramparts and storming through even the smallest of openings. The inhabitants of those settlements that lie within a few days' march of goblin-infested woods have rightfully grown to fear the eight-legged Deathbringers, which can so easily breach their defensive walls and towers. So, pretty cool, I think. Pretty damn cool. Also here, there's actually a quote from a militiaman saying they were already over the walls before the guards knew they were there. The town was destroyed, and half the population was carried off to the forest. That's Albrecht Heinz, a Drakwald militiaman of 57 varieties. So, yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool. Pretty damn scary. So, as well as the giant spiders, obviously there's the really giant spiders that aren't just mounts. They're massive. All right, it's the Arachnarok spiders, which I did speak about in an earlier, much earlier episode. But I actually read from one of the fantasy roleplay supplements description there. But now I'm actually going to read from the 8th edition battlebook for Orcs and Goblins. That's where I was just reading about the spider riders, by the way. So, and this will probably finish the episode, because I'm about to run out of footage, actually. But, you know, I want to talk about goblins, they're just so fun. So, anyway, of the many spiders that infest the wild woods, the colossal Arachnarok spider is the largest. It is a nigh unstoppable predator, bigger than an empire townhouse. In the depths of the forest, where the light of the sun never penetrates, the gargantuan eight-legged monstrosity stalks and entraps whole beastmen herds, as well as larger prey such as giants or cygors. After incapacitating larger creatures with flesh-dissolving venom, an Arachnarok spider will drink up the liquefied innards of its paralysed, but still living, quarry. Man-sized victims are wrapped into web casings by the hundreds. So potent is the poison in the Arachnarok's web that a few hours entwined in its sticky mass will reduce a man into a jelly-like morsel of putrefied flesh, a protein-rich puddle ready to be consumed. Arachnarok spiders have been known to ensnare the entire population of villages foolish enough to build near its darksome forest abode. Despite its bulk, the great beast can work noiselessly to encircle a hamlet within webs thicker than an orc's arms. None can escape. Then, leisurely, the creature will feast. Since goblins first entered the primeval woods, they have been prey to the spiders that dwelt within the arboreal confines. The goblinoids adapted their customs to the woodland environment, becoming the precursors of the forest goblin tribes known today. They soon found that packs of giant spiders could be defeated, and over time could even serve as mounts. The larger gigantic spiders could be fended off, and, if their broodlings were captured, those could be hand-fed and turned into great steeds for powerful leaders. However, no tribe could stem the onslaught of the Arachnarok spider. Luckily, these titanic beasts were rare, as their appearance spelt a horrible end for an entire tribe, or, at the best, a rapid move of camp with many a fearful backward look. The goblins reasoned that since the powerful arachnids could not be defeated, perhaps they could be appeased. Eight-legged totems festooned with webbed skulls began to appear alongside the traditional idols of Gork and Mork. The forest goblin shamans, having recently discovered the hallucinogenic venom of the tiniest spiders, talked about the many-faceted eyes of the feaster from beyond. With tongues swollen purple from the bites of tiny-mouthed mites, the shamans turned to worshipping the spider god. The tribes followed their shamans in supplicating themselves, and the spider cult was born. Although Gork and Mork were not forsaken, in the black thickets of endless forest the spider god soon ruled supreme. Forest goblin shamans led gruesome rituals, and the tribes offered elaborate sacrifices. Who knows what thoughts, if any, occur behind the multiple eyes of the Arachnarok spider. But the eight-legged behemoths did not attack forest goblin camps surrounded by spider totems. Some crept to the edge of the firelit clearings to watch the tribes weave the spider dance and offer gifts of warm blood to the insatiably hungry kings of spiders. Emboldened, some shamans dared approach their living idols. Many tried to communicate and were summarily eaten, until finally the mystical properties of the small purple skullback spiders were discovered. By chewing on enough of the bulbous, plum-coloured savouries, a shaman either died a twitching and horrible death, or entered such a state of shock that new vistas and mind paths into the great beyond were opened. The convulsive rhythms of the mind-numbed forest goblin shaman will entrance an Ragnarok. The great spider will sway back and forth on hunched legs, the image of the tiny twitching gobbo reflected in the black orbs of its many eyes. Under the hypnotic spell, the shamans discovered they could communicate in simple terms within a Ragnarok. The ravenous depredations of the Ragnarok were ended, and forest goblin shamans learned that, with enough bribes of fresh blood, they could call out to such a beast. Instead of fleeing from the deepwood behemoths, forest goblin tribes began to purposely seek out and encamp near an Ragnarok's lair. There, the tribe proffered the beast sacrifices, and used shamans to coax the enormous spiders out, should a formidable enemy draw near. The worshipped spiders grew even more bloated due to the non-stop supply of blood-rich offerings. Many spiders began to remain in their darksome holes, as still screaming food was thrown into their pits. Over long periods of time, some Ragnarok spiders no longer needed the shamanistic rituals, having grown tolerant of forest goblins. They even allowed them to scurry about their hulking bodies, treating the goblins as if they were young broodlings that needed to be carried upon their spiny backs. Great stick howdahs were created atop the beasts using green saplings and copious spider silk twinings to build battlements and platforms from which to shoot. Over the centuries, many Ragnarok spiders have become satisfied with their life of luxury, keeping their bulk hidden underground upon a nest bed of their victims' remains and their own foul wastes. Some noisome dens house veritable mountains of bones and dried husks. To forest goblins, these pits are the most holy sites for the spider cult. When the needs of such an ancient monstrosity are required, the great shaman moans and convulses in a summoning ritual, first to emerge from the dark hole of the spider's front legs, which it uses to pull the rest of its bloated body and nightmarish immensity out of its loathsome lair. Bedecked with shanty towers, altars to the spider god, or even crude catapults, the Ragnarok spider lurches forward to war, to once again terrorize the surface world. So, honestly, that is just one of the coolest things. I absolutely love that. Goblins are resourceful, aren't they? Much more than, they get credit for, I think. But yeah, really cool, really cool. Love a good spider god. It's always good fun. So, guys, that rounds it off, I think. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the Undercity of Middenheim, and hopefully we'll have a bit of time to talk about maybe some Nordland lore, because we'll soon know Nordland, I reckon. I don't think they've got much more fight in them, which is a bit of a shame. So yeah. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, please do comment, like, and subscribe, and I guess I'll see you in the next one. So have a good day, guys.